Smith, for joining me. I want to talk about this here.
Okay.
We're going to get to this 21-day spiritual journey devotional book that you wrote. I definitely want to get into the inspiration on that.
Okay.
Before we get into that, though, you did a post, which is one of the reasons why I asked you to come on. And you talked about some of your struggles and then being on the other side of the semicolon. It was just a few years ago, maybe, where I saw something on TikTok, and it was this kid who was videoing his mom, and behind her ear, she had a semicolon tattoo. And he was like, wait, mom? And so that's kind of where I started looking up the meaning of the semicolon and what it stands for. And I want to kind of go over that part, and then I want to turn it over to you. So let's just go back to some bare, basic English of what the semicolon is. It's two clauses that are related, but they can stand alone.
Exactly.
It indicates a pause, right? It means that you could have ended your sentence, but you didn't.
Right.
And you gave your sentence a chance to continue to blossom.
Yeah.
I love that so much. I love all of that. So I want to turn the floor over to you to kind of talk about why you made that post, because it was pretty bold. People are still not ready to talk about depression and anxiety and suicide and suicide attempts. And a lot of times, even in the church community, it's a very hard topic to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to just kind of turn the floor over to you and talk about whatever you want to talk about relating to it.
Well, suicide awareness and prevention is really dear to my heart. And that September, I'm working with teens now. And there's this scripture where Jesus, he had ascended, but he came back to earth. And Thomas was having problems believing that that was really Jesus. And so no one was supposed to see him. No one was supposed to touch him because he had already, transfigured all that. But he told Thomas, come look. He let Thomas see where he was pierced in his side and where he was nailed. He let him see his wounds, his scars. And I feel like in order to reach anybody, you've got to have that same level of transparency. And it's not just transparency, but it's also an invitation to be intimate with somebody on a different level, because you never know what someone's struggling with. So this time I just decided I'm just going to put it all out there. I'm just going to put it out there. Just put it out there, because I have wrestled with so much for so long, because your testimony or your story, it affects other people's lives. And you kind of walk on eggshells, like, should I say this or should I say that? It might make somebody else look bad. It might make people look some kind of way, and then people might come for me. And interesting enough, after I did that post, my phone did ring, but I didn't answer it because I stood on my faith, and I just was like, it was time. Stop walking on eggshells and be honest. I grew up, everything I thought was normal. I didn't know it wasn't normal until I was coming home from school one day, and I was banging on the door trying to get in the house. I was in elementary school and I couldn't get in the house. A neighbor had to call my mom. What I found out was my dad was an alcoholic, and he was passed out in the house. So fast forward to them getting a divorce because he was beating my mama. He was taking the bill money and getting high and doing whatever else with it. When they got a divorce, I remember it being so hard for my mom, it being a struggle. She literally had to choose either I'm going to pay the light bill or I'm going to pay the house note. And so she would have to pay the house note, and lo and behold, the lights would get cut off. But because of where we live, the neighbors were so sweet, they would run the cord from their house. One of the guys, he was an electrician by trade.
Wow.
How to rig it, and we would have utility, or we would have lights in one room. So we would all gather up in my mom's bedroom. We would just live in my mom's bedroom.
Wait. Let me stop you right there for 1 minute. That is why, and I'm almost teary-eyed, and I'm going to try not to get emotional on your story. It's so important to not try to hide what you're going through. Because if your mom would have just pretended that you guys were fine,
right,
she would have missed the opportunity for the neighbor to come in and be a blessing.
Right.
It may not have been convenient, but you still had some form of electricity that you can continue on until she's able to pay that bill.
Yeah.
But we want to mask so much and hide behind so much and pretend that everything's okay. But if you just let somebody in, and I understand because people can be cruel and people can take your information and they can make it harder on you.
Oh, yeah.
But to find that safe space, to have that safe space
Exactly.
is important. But go ahead.
So that was life. That's just how it was. And so I remember one day I got tired of my mom struggling, and she was always checking the mail to see if the child support check had come, and it never arrived. And I remember thinking if she had one less mouth to feed, things would get better. Things would be okay for her. One Christmas, I came up to her and said, Mama, don't worry about getting anything from me. Just make sure you get something for my sister and my brother. I'm okay. And so as a kid, I just kind of internalized everything, and I took everything on my own shoulder. And growing up, of course, everybody knows I had atopic dermatitis and my skin looked nothing like it looks now. It was horrible. I could barely move. It would get so bad. I would miss school because I couldn't walk or anything. And I remember my dad, it was his weekend, and I had a flare up and I was scratching and itching. He looked at me and he said, I'm just going to take you to the emergency room and tell them to cut off your legs. That's what we're going to do. I remember going to Tallahassee and coming back and him saying, yeah, I would have money if I didn't have to spend money on you, because I had to go specialist. So you're hearing all this growing up. And so I'm just like, I'm a waste. I'm an inconvenience to him. Then my mama is stressing. It just seemed like that's the best answer. That's the only answer I knew. Sometimes I would feel like I did something wrong or I didn't do something good enough. And then I was mixed between cutting, and then I had this fascination with sharp things. I would just get the blade really sharp and I would cut myself. So, I mean, yeah, I really did. I literally was in the middle of inhaling, sniffing rat poison when my brother walked in on me and knocked the spoon out of my hand. And that was like the third time. So yeah, I get it. I understand. I was in fifth grade and worked so hard trying to impress and make my dad love me, trying to say, hey, I'm not a waste. I'm somebody. I'm something. I had the highest GPA of anybody in the fifth grade, and I brought home all these awards and all these honors and all these accolades. But he was so mad because he had to give my mom child support because my brother needed shoes. And he threw the money in the car. And I was steady going, say, Daddy, look, Daddy, look, Daddy, look. He wasn't studying any of that. He was just in such a rage for having to pay child support. And as Mom backed the car out and we were on our way to get my brother some shoes, he came out of nowhere and he began ramming the vehicle and ran us off the road. We were sleeping in the house and he was outside. He had come down. He was trying to set the house on fire with us in the house. The neighbor knew what was going on. My aunt knew. We were going to church faithfully and trying our best, but we was in what they call an uncontrollable season. And it was a lot. It was a lot. And so as a kid, you see your parents going through that. You're the oldest and you feel like you're supposed to step up and you got to help or you got to do something. Maybe it is my fault. Maybe I did do this. Maybe I am the reason to blame. Maybe me not being here is a better option for everybody. And in my mind, I just imagine how peaceful it would be for my mom. She would just have to worry about my brother and my sister.
Back during that era, and I won't just say women, but people didn't really report a lot of stuff. They didn't really talk about a lot of stuff like that was going on, or even really try to fight back. A lot of stuff that was occurring in that era, people was just putting up with it.
Yeah.
And really didn't even know that they could fight back or should fight back. Because when you talk about your dad ramming his car into your car and trying to set the house on fire, that's criminal activity.
Right. It is. It is.
But back then, you just dealt with it. And you just deal with a lot. But then it goes back to, who do you really turn to? Mm-hmm. Who's really going to help you?
Right.
And that's why it is so important that we do stop trying to hide and cover up stuff and talk about stuff like this. How did you get out? And I know it's probably still a work in progress and been a journey for you, but what was like the first step in saying, okay, I've attempted suicide. I'm still here. Now what? What was your on the other side of the semicolon, how did you get to start crossing over to that other side?
There was this lady named Gail Robinson, and I had to be about 27 because I was still wrestling. And I just had my son, and I was going through a lot with his dad. I was at the point to where I was just like, you know what? I had just got paid. I had made up in my mind. I know what it's like to sit on the pew and go ahead and repent to God, because you already made up your mind you're going to take your life. Sitting right there on the church pew. I understand that. That's where I was. And God had laid it on my stepdad's heart. That's the one I call daddy. Now he raised us. Just to say, go to Thomasville and talk to Mama Blake. Talk to Mama Daddy Blake, you know. He just kept saying, just go down there. And he didn't know I had already contemplated on loading my kid up, and I was going to take my baby, well, I was going to drive off a bridge. He didn't know that. But he just had this urge. So I was like, fine, I'll go. And I walked in, they had this store called the Master's Table, and the lady name was Gail Robinson. And when I walked in, it's like I walked into heaven. I can't explain it to this day, but when I crossed the threshold, it was like I didn't feel any of what I felt prior to walking into that door. And I kept hearing music playing. It was the sweetest music I ever heard. And she said, there's no radio on. There's no radio on. I wish I could put that music on paper because it was just beautiful. And she said, well, what can I do for you? I had money in my hand. I said, can I just sew? And I explained what I was going through. And I said, I don't know what else to do. And she grabbed my hand. She said, well, I'm going to take the seed. She said, that's sweet. She took that. She grabbed my hand and she looked me in the eye. And she said, I was where you were. And she began to tell me her story. And that's when I got the strength that day by sharing what I was going through. And I decided if she could make it, then I can make it. But it hasn't always been glorious. It has always been a fight because it's a tormenting spirit. People don't understand. It is a tormenting spirit. And there's always something that creeps up that makes you feel rejected or less than, or like you have no business doing this. But I thank God that when I made that post in September, I had not battled with suicide or wanting to take my life in about 8 months prior to that post. So that was a huge accomplishment. And I attribute all of that to just, I know people say pray and stuff, but a closed mouth don't get fed. So you've got to ask, you got to say, hey, I need help. I'm not all right. Because there are certain words that are trigger words for me, and I would burst into tears. And so my doctor put me in touch with a good therapist. I have Jesus therapy and meds.
I love the fact that people are going to therapy. I love it. I'm an advocate for it. I will scream it to the mountaintop because we grew up in church and people say, okay, you go to church, all you need is Jesus. And if you go to therapy, that means you don't trust in Jesus. That means you don't trust in God. That means that you feel like there's somebody else that's better than God. That is such a fallacy. And we really got to stop believing that and stop instilling that in other people, because you go to church, you hear the word, but you haven't talked about your pain.
Right.
So it's still there. And then when you go back to the tormenting spirit, well, you're not tormented in church because you're not thinking about your pain in church. But when you get home, it's right there because now you got time to think about it. So unless you talk it out and get it out and heal and start taking those step by step or whatever it takes to find that worthiness, because your unworthiness goes back to when you was a kid seeking validation and love and attention from someone who was supposed to love you unconditionally. So the work has got to be done. You can't skip over the work and put a Jesus stamp on it and say you're good.
Exactly. Because all you're doing is just breeding another demon. You just raising another monster that raise up in your own kid. And I was determined that my child was not going to suffer from the same junk that I suffer from. Yeah. He knew his mama's struggles, but he saw his mama doing the work that it required to be better. I want this going to be a success in church and a failure in private. We weren't having that. We weren't going to do that. I wanted him to know that you can be, what they say, prosperous and in health, even as your soul prosper in every area of your life. You can't be victorious in one area and lacking in another area. It's got to go, because that doesn't make sense. We don't serve a broken God. He mends us, but he's not broken. And when we're in him, he says he owns everything, right? We have access to everything that he's given us. So one of those things is common sense, applicable stuff. Go to therapy, talk to somebody. Find out what's going on. What's your trigger? Why are you acting the way you act? Is it you or is it something else? One big thing that I've learned to do, which was hard, was forgive myself. Of course, I forgave other people, but I had to forgive myself too, because, I was hurting myself. I was holding myself to this unrealistic standard that nobody ever held me to but me, And so I had to learn forgiveness, big, huge part of the process.
Yeah. I'm not a really big advocate of tattoos. For one, they hurt, but I do have one, and it says, to thy own self be true. And I love that statement, because as we grow up, we're so conditioned to please people and so conditioned to make everybody else happy, we forget to be true to ourselves. You talked about doing the work. So going to therapy is one way that you do the work. When you're by yourself, give me some examples of doing the work. How do you tackle this when you're alone, when you're feeling depressed? What are you doing to pull yourself out, keeping yourself out? Because it is a day-by-day thing. It's not just, okay, I'm good today, I went to therapy and now I'm great. How do you do the work?
A lot of people don't realize that after therapy, you can almost bottom out, because you unpack so much in a session, and then you go home and it's just like, oh my God. That could be even worse than going than prior to. But what I have learned to do personally, if I'm having a low day, if I'm having one of those days, I will change my atmosphere. That may require me playing music loudly. That may require me getting in the car, getting out of these four walls. Definitely getting out of these four walls and just taking a drive. It may look like me, child, I swear I can sew, but I can't. I learned to just step outside of anything normal, because to me, some normal stuff could be triggers for me, and it makes me feel like I'm stuck or I'm not progressing like I should. And then I start looking at everybody else. And another thing I don't do, I'm not on social media when it's a low day, because people be lying. I mean, it is, I'm sorry to say it like that, but people will present you with a false narrative, and you'll sit there and start comparing yourself to what you see or what they pretend to be doing. If you're dealing with depression or whatever, social media is one of the tools used to torment you, because you'll be sitting there thinking that somebody got it made, not realizing that that's just a little bit, a snippet, but what really is going on, you wouldn't even begin to believe. So I've learned to just change my atmosphere. That's the biggest thing. I change the narrative when it's a low day. I have to, because if I don't, these walls will start closing in on me, and I will be in a really low place, and Prozac ain't gonna get me up out of there. So I have to, that's like calling a friend, like, girl, I'm not doing good today. I'm not doing good today. And there's something that my pastor taught me. She's told me to vent up. In other words, you need to find people who are higher ranking than you, people who have true testimonies, or people who have been there, gone through that. Because just talk to somebody on my level, or not even able to handle the stuff. So you got to be able to find somebody to vent up to, somebody who is able to handle that weight. I might call somebody and they ain't ready to handle that. They can't handle that. So I have to make sure that whoever I do confide in or call or vent to, it's somebody that's higher up than I am.
That's an interesting point, because a lot of people, they don't want to deal with folks that's dealing with depression. Right. They don't want to deal with that. And going back to social media, I joke a lot. I use social media as a way to make myself laugh. And going to the lake, being around water, that's my happy place. When I was in therapy, one of my therapists said, you got to find your happy place. You got to figure out what your happy place is, and you got to go there. If it's going for a walk, if it's playing music, if it's going to the mall or coffee shop, going to the lake, figure out what makes you happy and do that. So when you say, I've got to change my atmosphere, that's exactly what he said. You got to change your atmosphere. Sooner you feel like you're getting depressed, that's when you need to start changing your atmosphere. You can't sit and wait. It's going to be too late.
It's going to be too late.
In 2022, I was so dark, deep, depressed. I was in such a state where I felt like I had lost everything. Nobody knew it though. My business, I got into a partnership and ended up losing my business. Then I wasn't working. I was going to school. Massage therapy saved me in so many different ways. But the entire time that I was going to massage school, I was going home and I was just like, I don't care if I don't make it to 2023. This is a real conversation that I had on a regular basis for the entire year. And I have never thought that I would ever find myself in a place where I felt so low. And I really couldn't believe it because I'm such a happy person. I'm so happy. But I was so low that year. I was so low. Everything seemed like it was just going so wrong. So when you talk about going on social media and people look like they got it all together, it's true. You really can't go by what you see on social media because you don't know what people are dealing with. You don't know what they're struggling with. And the interesting thing is when I was in my lowest point, I started writing myself emails. And I would write an email and I would say it was from God, God and my angels. And I would say, Colette, congratulations on getting your new job. I was so proud of you. And I would flood my emails with congratulations on doing whatever it is that I needed and I wanted from God. I would congratulate myself on that and I like sign God and all your angels. As often as I needed to, I would write myself an email and one by one, everything I wrote started coming just like when 2023 hit. Matter of fact, New Year's of 2023, I said, God, you can take my life now. It don't matter to me. I felt like I had nothing else because everything had been taken from me in 2022. I'm not working. I don't know. Like you can have me. If we're done here, we can go. Like I was so low. And then in March of 2023, everything just started unfolding. And it was just like bam, 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 bam. But it was also like my mindset of me being on the other side of that semicolon, starting to send myself those emails and starting to see those things come into pass. As before, I was just like, well, God, I'm good with you. Me and you good. So if you want to take me out, I'm fine with it. But I started finding reasons to keep living.
Yeah.
And then I started saying, I think I want to live. And when I tell you 2023 came in and everything that I've just been praying for and asking God for just started unfolding all at the same time, and still unfolding. But if I had taken my life in 2022, then I wouldn't be here to see the goodness of God and to see how faithful God really is. That's why you can't give up.
Right.
You don't really know what else it is. People really don't know what you go through, and they can't compare their life to you.
Exactly.
Because they're not going through what you're going through. So it's a beautiful thing when you are bold enough to say, I've gone through it, I'm going through it, but I'm on the other side of that semicolon. Not just saying, okay, I'm done and I don't have no more depression, I don't struggle, but when I do struggle, this is what I do to overcome that. Because people need to know it's not a, okay, we fix it and now we're good.
Right. It's not.
It's when I still feel this way. Now, what do I do to keep getting over those humps? I try to come up with a few stats when I talk sometimes. In 2021, I believe, 48,000 people committed suicide. One death every 11 minutes. That's just the people that were successful at it, not the people that thought about it.
Right.
Not the people that's struggling with it. It's a real thing. It's got to be talked about. It's got to be talked about in the church. It's not a God is not a good God because I struggle with depression. We got to stop linking those two together and acting like it's either one or the other.
Right, it's not.
We got to still deal with everyday life. Just because you gave your life to God doesn't mean you're not still hurting from your father being a bad dad. You're still hurting. And we got to still deal with that pain of that little girl that's inside of you. So before we run out of time, hold on, let me get this book. Wait, is there anything else you want to say on the other side of the semicolon before we move on to this jewel here?
There is joy. There is joy. Ooh, don't cry. There are some things I never would have imagined, ever. Book number 2 is in the works. So that's number 1 right there. That's the baby. And it's still surreal. I still have a problem believing that I did a thing. If you just hold out, joy does come. Joy does come. It's a process. Every day is not going to be great, but if you just hang in there and just stay the course, joy does come.
I love the fact of you saying just hang in there, stay the course. But not only are you hanging in there and you're staying the course, a part of the course is writing your book. Mm-hmm. A part of staying the course is telling your story and doing those things that you love and feeling like, you know what, I want to write this book. And even though I'm saying that I shouldn't, that I'm not worthy, that I can't, I'm still going to do it. But that's a part of that staying the course.
Yep. Fear would say no. And then after it's written and whatever, the fear would tell you to recall the email. Take it back from the publicist. Don't not. My publicist, LaShonda Love. Everybody needs a LaShonda in their life. She is one of those people who will just look past your fears, look past your we can'ts, and she said, we're gonna do it. When I tried to say, okay, I changed my mind, she said, oh, it's already done. You have to have somebody who, like I said, vent up. You got to have that one person who just gonna stand fear right in the face and say, no, we gonna do this. Come on, girl. You got to have that one crazy person in your boat. You got to have them. So,
you know, what I love about your book is I'm a journalist. I love to journal. I love the fact that it has pages where you can just write your thoughts and it gives you some prayers that you can say. I love this book so very much, so very much. You did a great job on it.
My favorite part is where you can go in and write down the date that your prayer was answered. That's my favorite part.
I love it. I love it. I love it so much. And people can get this on Amazon. I'll put the link in the video. Okay, so before we end, tell me a little bit about this book. What inspired you? Just give me a little bit about this.
That book was produced by pressure. I had just come out of surgery and was asked to do a 21-day devotion for ministry. And it has just been lingering around, just sitting there being idle. And I was like, other people could be blessed by this. And so that's what God gave me to write. And there it is. That's my baby.
There it is. I love it. Congratulations. When is the next book coming out?
The next book will be out in March.
I know, yeah. Fingers crossed. Well, I'm so looking forward to it. I think this is great. This is a wonderful accomplishment. And you have so many wonderful things that you're doing, not just in the house of God, but in your work atmosphere. You work with the youth. So you're making a change. And then some of the things that you didn't have growing up, you're able to put those seeds back into other people's kids. And that's beautiful. Beautiful story.
I just want to say my mom is great. Everybody's doing wonderful. Your dad surrendered his life to God. It's a journey. Every day is not great, but we do have a relationship. We do talk. So there is life after the semicolon.
I love it. Congratulations to you for everything.